press their request to speak buttons, and I call on Ruth Davidson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Last year, the First Minister promised this Parliament that she would cooperate fully with the Salmond inquiry. She said the inquiries will be able to request whatever material they want, and I undertake today that we will provide whatever material they request. Yet, despite losing 2 votes in this Parliament, the Government is refusing to hand over the legal advice it received on the matter. Key Scottish Government officials who could shed light on the affair are being blocked from giving evidence, leading the SNP convener of the committee to say that its inquiries are being obstructed. The simple question is this: why has the First Minister broken her promise?
First Minister.
That is not the case. The Scottish Government is cooperating and will continue to cooperate with the inquiry. Nobody has been blocked from giving evidence. I myself have recused myself from the decisions in relation to this for the very good reason. I think that it is partly my conduct that the inquiry is looking at. In terms of legal advice, the Deputy First Minister set this out very clearly to Parliament. Of course, and indeed this is an issue in the context of this inquiry. Ministers have to abide with the terms of the Ministerial Code. The Ministerial Code says at paragraph 2.38 that ministers must not divulge the contents of legal advice. Paragraph 2.40 recognises that in exceptional circumstances, ministers can consider that the balance of interest favours disclosure. Ministers and the Deputy First Minister is leading this consideration, is considering whether that test is met. But if ministers do consider that that test is met, they must then get the prior consent of law officers. As the Deputy First Minister has set out, that process is underway and he will update Parliament when that process has concluded.
Ruth Davidson.
The blunt fact is this: the only conceivable reason that she is breaking her promise is because she has something to hide. So let's try this a different way. I'll say what the legal advice contained, and the First Minister can tell me if I'm wrong. The advice received by the Scottish Government's Senior Counsel warned that the Scottish Government's handling of the sexual harassment allegations were deeply flawed and that the judicial review would find in favour of Alex Salmond, as it duly went on to do. And this advice was proffered to the Scottish Government long before they finally collapsed their own case, running up hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of bills in the process, and utterly failing the women who came forward. So tell the public, which part of that have I got wrong?
First Minister.
As Ruth Davidson knows, if I was to go into the detail, I would stand here right now and I would breach the Ministerial Code. Perhaps Ruth Davidson wants that to be the case, but I'm not going to do that. The Ministerial Code, and I've just narrated the Ministerial Code and quoted directly from it, sets out a process that ministers have to go through should legal advice be divulged. And just to remind the Chamber and others watching, the starting point in the Ministerial Code is that ministers must not divulge the contents of legal advice unless certain tests are fulfilled, and we are going through a process right now of consideration of those tests. That is the right and proper way to do this. Once that process has concluded, the Deputy First Minister will update Parliament about the outcome of it.
Davison.
The cynical obfuscation that we have seen to the committee, from the Deputy First Minister in last night's debate, and from the First Minister here today, only serves to show why this advice needs to be brought into the open. It's an argument that the First Minister once accepted herself, an argument that the whole Parliament has considered, has debated and has now voted on twice, and twice the Government has refused. So can I ask the First Minister, if the Parliament votes to release these documents a third time, is the First Minister going to again disrespect this chamber and the people who voted for us?
First Minister.
It is because of the votes in Parliament that ministers are now undergoing the process set down in the Ministerial Code. If we were to take a decision that didn't go through that proper process, ministers would be in breach of the Ministerial Code. And I suspect we would have members of the Parliament raising the concern that we were acting outside of the Ministerial Code. The Ministerial Code The starting point in it is that ministers must not divulge the contents of legal advice. That's not something that is unique in Scotland. There are provisions like that that govern many different administrations. The two-stage process is that ministers have to consider whether the balance of public interest favours disclosure in a particular case, and then, should they decide that, they have to get, and again I'm quoting, the prior consent of law officers. That's the process that is underway, and when that process has concluded, the Deputy First Minister will update Parliament. That's the right way to do this, and that is the process that is underway. For my part, I've given my own written evidence to the committee. I have not yet been invited to give evidence to the committee orally. When I am so invited to give evidence, I, of course, as I am bound to do, will do that. I, the Government, will cooperate fully with the inquiry, as we have already been doing.
Ruth Davidson.
Presiding Officer, the sheer hypocrisy of this is overwhelming. Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP never tire of lecturing anyone who will listen about the will of Parliament and how it should be respected, except, of course, when it doesn't suit their purpose. She says that our government will cooperate with the committee. In fact, she obstructs it. She says all relevant documents will be made available, but she refuses to hand them over. She says repeatedly that the will of Parliament should be respected, but the only one disrespecting it is her, by ignoring 2 votes where a majority of this chamber, the chamber we are sitting in right now, has demanded that legal advice to her government is shown to the country. During this affair, the First Minister has conveniently forgotten key information, dates, meetings and conversations. But hasn't she forgotten something far more fundamental too?
First Minister.
The Government is acting in line with the Ministerial Code, and of course Ruth Davidson will, on any occasion where she or her colleagues believe that government or any minister within the government has acted out with the Ministerial Code, of course get up and demand inquiries and investigations and accountability for that. That is right and proper. The government is not ignoring the votes in Parliament. What the government is doing as a result of the votes in Parliament is going through the process that the Ministerial Code explicitly sets out before legal advice can be divulged. If we didn't go through that process, we would be breaching the Ministerial Code, and I'm sure the position of Ruth Davidson would suddenly go full circle and the line of attack on the government would be something completely different. The Deputy First Minister has set out the process that the government is going through. I've set it out again. I have quoted from the Ministerial Code. That process will be concluded, and when it is concluded, the Deputy First Minister will advise Parliament of the outcome.
Thank you.